Somewhere along the line, we changed vote for 2 to vote for 1. That proof was then created, sent back over to the Aurora City Clerk, who gave his sign-off on it, saying that it was okay, and we moved forward with printing, thinking that everything was good to go. Long story short, ultimately this falls on us, as we created the error to begin with, and I do take responsibility for it as being the leader of this office. We do have a couple of things that's important for Aurora voters to know. If you have already received your ballot and you have returned it, which we've only received 1 to 2 so far to date, so not very many have returned them back to us yet, you will get a corrected ballot in the mail. If you have already sent in your original ballot, we will hold that particular ballot until 7 p.m. on election night to see if we have gotten your second ballot returned to us. If we have, your second ballot will be the one that is counted. If we have not, we'll go ahead and process the first ballot that we receive. It is very, very, very important that when you receive your second ballot that you do vote the entire length of the ballot, not just the one question surrounding the Aurora City Council at large race. So again, make sure you vote your entire ballot. If we don't receive your second ballot by 7 p.m. on election night, again, we will count that first ballot. If you happen to have overvoted, you've become aware of this issue before you've actually voted, it is okay to select 2 candidates as you're supposed to on that initial ballot. And again, when we're processing it through, we will go ahead and tabulate that. If you do that, no need to send us in your corrected ballot. Okay, we'll go ahead and process off the first one. Again, if you haven't received it, go ahead and destroy or if you haven't yet voted, go ahead and wait till you receive that second corrected ballot. Complete that one all the way down, send that in to us, and go ahead and destroy your first ballot as you won't actually need it. Ballots will go out this Friday. We are already working with our vendor, and they have guaranteed us that they will be printed and mailed this Friday, which is actually the statutory deadline for us to meet compliance with the law to get ballots out to voters. This first set of ballots were actually mailed this last Friday, and most voters got them in their mailbox yesterday or today, as Monday was a holiday. So it's relatively quick movement. If the ballots get out this Friday, you should receive yours early part of next week. Of course, our voting centers, our voting service and polling centers will open up 8 days before the election. If for whatever reason you haven't received your ballot, you need to update your registration or do anything else along those lines, ask us questions, you can go on into those voting centers. We have also stood up a phone center that you can call into to get your questions answered as well. At this time, I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. I imagine there's a ton out there.
I was just wondering, you said somewhere along the way this mistake was made. Is there going to be an investigation to figure out kind of what happened, or do you have any idea yet?
It's a very good question. So we are most focused right now on getting the corrected ballots out to voters to ensure that this election goes off without any further hitches. Once that's completed, we've tallied all the vote and everything's been settled, we will take a look at our processes to find out exactly where that point took place, and we will go ahead and fix it so that nothing like this ever again happens in Adams County.
But right now you're not quite sure?
Right now we have a general idea of where it's at. However, I don't think it's appropriate to release any misinformation, so I'm going to hold any comments on that until we have identified it, certainly.
And I know people are going to wonder this, especially when politics are involved.
No, this was entirely clerical. It was entirely clerical. Anytime you have humans involved with a process, you're bound to have errors that take place. And unfortunately, in a world where errors are not acceptable, we have had one. This isn't the first time a ballot has ever been misprinted. That has happened before throughout Colorado, throughout the United States, and throughout the history of elections. So unfortunately, it does take place, and we will put measures in place to be sure that it doesn't happen again in the future.
So at one point it did say vote for 2 when you first got it from the city?
Correct. When we first got it from the city, the certification said vote for 2. And when it was entered in for the proofing process, It got switched during that period of time to say vote for one. That was then sent back to the Aurora City Clerk, who certified that it was correct, and so we moved forward with printing at that point.
You're up here taking the heat, yet the city clerk also approved it. Should that person not be here too, to say, I also screwed up?
Ultimately, they coordinate with us to run their election, so the responsibility does fall onto my office. I think that is part of the conversation for after the election, that he and I will sit down and we'll figure out how to best move forward to ensure that these types of errors don't happen again.
What would you say to voters who may now be concerned about the integrity of the election?
The integrity of the election is definitely intact. We're working with the Secretary of State, the City of Aurora, to ensure that every vote counts and that each individual only has the one vote. We do have some measures in place to ensure that is going to happen correctly, and come the results of this election, I'm confident, and the voters should be confident that they will be correct.
How large is the pool of people that this impacts, given the fact it's just the Aurora section of Adams County?
It's approximately 17,000 voters, which represents about 7% of the overall voting population of Adams County.
Do you know the population of the people who can vote in that race when you take into account the Arapaho and Douglas statute?
I'm not aware of the Arapaho and Douglas numbers. I'm focused solely on Adams County. So.
You have a lot of solutions that people can do. It's not as simple as do this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
If someone voted, they can override their vote. If someone has the original, they can vote the proper number of votes in that race. There's just not one thing that's going to cause, people are going to screw this up. Is there no better way to simplify this for them?
So in the process that actually we're putting in place for this is similar to if somebody needed to vote a replacement ballot. It's an existing process. If I were to vote my ballot and decide that I wanted to actually change my vote at any point along the way before election night, I could go into a voter service and polling center, request a new ballot, fill it out in the manner that I want, submit it, and that will void my first ballot. So this process mirrors that, and it is what's set up through the Secretary of State's office to ensure the integrity of the election.
It sounds like you would prefer, though, for people to use the second ballot, even though if they use the first one and mark two, you'll still count it.
Yes, I think so. I think it is, although if we do receive that first ballot back, as I mentioned, we will tabulate it. If we don't yet receive the second one by 7 p.m. on election night, that second ballot will be the corrected ballot. So instead of saying vote for one, as it does now, it'll say vote for two. Now voters, that ballot will have a different color along the header. Right now, the ballots that we print have a gray color. We're working with our printers to determine the best color to change that to, so that there's no affiliation, something along yellow, lavender, some color that doesn't have anything to do with a political party. And those ballots will be very clear to our election judges as we get those ballots back, which one is the first version, which one's the second version. And it should be clear to voters as well based on that color.
So you prefer them to use the second, or it literally doesn't matter?
We'd prefer they use the second, but ultimately, in the end, if we receive a ballot, we're going to tally it.
So in other words, if they've got it open on their table right now, they haven't voted, but they've heard about the fact that they can vote for two, you're saying wait until you get your second one and vote on that one, preferable to the original one.
If that is their preference, if they want to wait, they certainly can. If they're busy, going out of town, have something else to do, that's why we're a mail-in state, they can certainly fill out the one that they have completely, mark two or select two candidates for the at-large race, city council race, and submit that one back to us either through the mail or through Dropbox, or they can come on into one of our, the government center here, or through one of our voter service and polling centers.
And for clarification, you said you've only had 1 or 2 people already turn in?
As of yesterday, end of day, we only had 600 ballots returned countywide, and there were 0 that came back from this impacted area as of yesterday, close of business. This morning, I've been told that there were, at the time, there was 1 that had been received back. This was mid-morning. I don't have an exact time for you. I imagine that through the post office or through drop boxes, we've received a handful of others, but it's not a very large portion of that population just yet.
You mentioned the concern of
partially filled out second ballots. What happens if someone partially fills it, just votes for that one portion, leaves the rest blank?
So if we get that second ballot in, and it's only that particular question that's filled out, unfortunately, per statute, that is the ballot that supersedes the existing one. So we will only be able to count that one particular race. We wouldn't be able to take a look at their first ballot, count the other ones, and then take a look at the second ballot and count just that question. We do have to take a look at that second ballot as a whole. So again, very, very important. Vote your entire ballot. Not just in this case, but every time there's an election, it's very important to vote your entire ballot. And we are working with, obviously, our media partners, as you're all here, our social media outlets, email, and other modes of communication to get this information out to our Aurora population.
That second ballot, the one that's going to go out on Friday, that will supersede the first. So in case someone does the full election on the first and only does the Aurora election on the second, it's only going to be that second one that gets counted.
That's correct.
You won't even look at the first.
That's correct.
Okay. Also, you said if something got switched, can you identify whether it was switched at the printer or switched in your office on that one, on the 2 to 1?
It was inside our own office here. It was our four walls. Yeah.
So
No,
last year, there was the 61 ballots in Adams County that went missing.
Right.
And now to have this mistake on top of that, it could create a lot of mistrust for folks and voters who live in Adams County. What would you say to that?
So it sure can. And it is two completely separate issues. We do work with a printer. We also work with a logistics company. We work with the post office. In the case of the ballots that went missing, that were located actually at the logistic company's secure lot, that was out of the Adams County Clerk and Recorder's control, essentially, at that point. That did take place under my predecessor, and he did work diligently to ensure that it got corrected. And ultimately, voters that wanted to vote were able to vote. And interestingly enough, the impacted area had a higher turnout for voting than it usually does in comparison. So that, although not good, the error did have a positive when it came to voter turnout. In this particular case, this is entirely on us. We made a mistake, and I own it. Voters should be confident in our elections process. We do have quite a bit of equipment back there. We have very trained and skilled employees here at the county, as well as election judges that come in to help, and they should feel comfortable in the election. If there's any concerns, they can certainly come as an election watcher and watch the process. We do welcome everybody in. It is full access. And we will have that link available on our website if that's something that they want to do. In order to have full and complete access to the entire process, they do have to take a bit of a quick training on it, just pertaining to potential access to personal or identifiable information, if they might see an address, right? Somebody's name and address, something along those lines. But they will never have access to the way somebody voted. I think that's important to point out. But if they want to become an election watcher, they're welcome to come on in, and we'd love to have them.
How did you find out?
I actually got a phone call last night at shortly before midnight from the Secretary of State, which is never the way that you want to end your evening when you're a county clerk, to hear from the Secretary of State. So once that took place, we started digging into it. I woke up my staff, who were already sound asleep. We started looking into the issue and formulating, what took place and what our response needed to be and how we needed to handle it. So we've been working on this since midnight last night. Personally, I think I went to bed around 2 and got up about 6 and came back in here and we started working on it. I know my staff, some of them were up at 4 this morning working on it as well. So we're taking this very seriously. We know it's a very serious concern for our voters, and we want to make sure that everybody has that right to vote. So we're working on it as quickly and as certainly as we can.
What's the cost to your division to get these additional ballots out?
The cost is actually not that large in the grand scheme of the cost of an election. It is about $20,000 to $22,000. Certainly a significant portion or a significant amount of money. However, we can absorb it into our current budget. I'm all about lean and efficiency processes, so we work very hard to ensure that we are coming in under budget, so there is plenty of money left over in our coffers at the end of the day to absorb
What's
this.
the total coordinated election cost in comparison?
Total coordinated election costs can range, a smaller one along these lines can range anywhere about around $300,000.
But this one this year, I'm talking
I don't have the final numbers just yet.
about 300K or something.
Yeah.
Is K&H still the printer?
K&H is still the printer. I have been out to their facility. It was actually one of the first things that I did when I came into office, and they run a very nice shop. There's very few printers in the country that can handle our volume, and they are one of them. We did take a look at some other options, and K&H is simply the best out there at this point.
And for everybody else in Adams County who does not live in that Aurora area, this does not concern them at all.
No, it does not. We've gone back and we've double-checked, and this was the only issue that took place impacting this approximately 17,400 voters. And the rest of Adams County is business as usual, which is good news when it comes to elections. And the other counties, Arapahoe and Douglas, did not have the same issues. They're not impacted either.
Any more? And then I have other folks if you'd like to speak with offline off to the side for the Secretary of State's office.
Do you have a visual representation of the ballot? Do you have a sample ballot that we can photograph and show in the state?
We're working on it right now. Honestly, as Josh said, they've been working on it all night.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else for me? All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much again for coming out on such short notice. And if you do have any questions, please get them over to Jim. We do also have members of Secretary of State that are here to answer any questions that you may have for them offline as well.